Hello and welcome to Men in Progress, the podcast of United Methodist Men of Trietsch and part of the Life Plus God podcast series from Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church. I'm Dave Casey, a longtime member of the men's group here at Trietsch, and one of many men just trying to live out our faith and grow in our relationship with Jesus Christ. For Christians, December is a special time of year when we celebrate Jesus' birth, or at least it's designed to be. The truth is the Christmas season can be challenging for Christians and non-Christians alike. For some people, Christmas brings up any number of unhappy memories, or it accentuates the fact that many people are alone this time of year, or stuck with family they may not have the best relationship with. In this episode of Men in Progress, we're discussing the question, what do you do when Christmas isn't so merry? To help me answer that question, we have an extraordinary panel. So even though this is Men in Progress, we have Kathy O'Keefe here. So, Kathy's the founder of Winning the Fight, a nonprofit here in the Flower Mound area that provides drug education, support, and necessary resources to youth and families that suffer with the disease of addiction. I've also got Sonny Gann, who, among many other credentials, is a licensed professional counselor. Yep. So we'll see what he has to contribute. And finally, David Ware, who's a Stephen minister here at Trietsch. And the Stephen Ministries, and I'll have him elaborate on this, but they provide high-quality, confidential, Christian-centered care to people who are hurting. So, guys, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Dave. Good to be here.
Looking forward to this. A lot. So what do we do when Christmas isn't so merry? And I guess a logical place to start would be, for a time that's supposed to be so happy, why are the holidays so stressful for so many people? So, Sonny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, David. And I'm really glad to be here, by the way. This is this Trietsch has been home for me for a long time, so it's good to be back in here.
I won't go into the whole thing. Sonny is actually the mayor of Trietsch. That's another story for another podcast.
Yeah, unelected. Self-appointed, maybe.
Yeah.
Dave, it's a good question. And it's one that I think a lot of families struggle with. And part of it's some of the things that you've already mentioned is that every Christmas, every holiday looks different than the previous one. By loss, by addition, right? I mean, it's just every holiday. And I was thinking about ours in particular. We went through a season where my mom had passed, and then my sister passed, and then my brother-in-law passed. And
wow.
In a very short period of time. So every holiday looked a little different.
Yeah.
And then we had one where we had grandkids being added to the mix.
Yeah.
So there's loss, there's add. So everyone looks a little bit different.
Yeah, families aren't static, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
They just change. And so it's I think it's trying, and for me, to answer that question, we try to settle on traditions, and they just change over the years.
Yeah.
The things that I grew up in, they're not the same anymore. Families are very all over the country. They move. And for me, for years, it was the same every year.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That continuity is just not there the way it was.
Not the way it was, Dave.
Yeah. So, David, as a Stephen minister, do you guys see more people seeking out help or counseling around holidays?
Wouldn't necessarily say we see more of it, but I think the closeness that the Stephen minister can have during this, we know it's sort of a difficult time. And so the closeness and the opportunity to lean in a little bit more and listen certainly presents itself this time of year.
And you might explain, I kind of just did a broad brush, but you might explain what the Stephen ministry is all about.
Yeah, so typically there's a kind of a triage approach, and so someone may approach one of the pastors and need more ongoing care, but it's not necessarily a professional care. And so it's just a lay person that typically will listen and talk with the person, try to be face-to-face as much as we can.
Wow.
And so typically we try to engage with folks, once a week, and we have a pretty good training program and ongoing training so that as people work through whatever issues they happen to have, then there is a conclusion, but we don't rush it. And the main thing that we try not to do is tell people what to do. We simply listen. Right. We try to pray over them and, work through God's mercy and grace over that person so that God can be the healer. And we just simply have a very simple job of just listening.
Yeah, listening's so important. I mean, that's and it's a lost art. Let me tell you, with the culture we live in. So Kathy, we've met before. I think the United Methodist Men here at Trietsch have been a supporter of winning the fight over the years. But tell us a little bit about winning the fight, and then more specifically, if you see any differences in what you do around the holidays around.
So we started winning the fight in 2010 because we lost our 18-year-old son, Brett, to a drug overdose. So we sat back and said, what do we need? We lacked education, support, and resources. So that's exactly what we do. And we try to stay right in there. And when I drove out of there, I'm kind of hit on the head, which is good. It's kind of like, listen.
Oh, you got to have focus.
Oh, yeah,
right?
God puts me right where I need to be. But, it's kind of interesting because we expect holidays to be perfect.
Yeah.
So there's always disappointment because nothing is ever perfect. Especially when you start throwing family involved and nobody's living together anymore. Parents are living together and they get along, and they can't get along with their kids because their kids aren't listening. It's just the dynamics of family are really changing. And I find that, especially in substance use, I find that people tend to not come forward. They sit and live in it rather than try to come forward in it. And especially at the holidays, because they're supposed to be perfect. And it's really challenging.
And there's so much going on at the holidays. There's parties. There's, all the stress, that over and above what normal life is like.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then you have people that substance use, and they do it because they want to feel better, because it's supposed to be happy time. And that's very scary for parents and loved ones. So it's just the dynamics are really, really difficult for most of my families at this time.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Wow. So just one more thing to put on the pile.
Yeah,
right?
one more thing.
Gosh. So it's we talked about this a little bit. I think each of you touched on this, but as in your capacities as counselors and caregivers, certainly, respecting confidentiality and everything, what types of things have you seen people struggle the most with this time of year? David, have you anything specific?
So I think Kathy kind of hit on it a little bit, or maybe everybody has, that I think everybody has a certain perception of what is normal, and nobody's normal is the same.
Right.
And we want that certainty. We want that what's normal. And then when you don't achieve that perfection in your mind, you struggle with why is it that way or why is it not that way. And it typically it goes back to upbringing and things such as that. So it's a very complex time for many people. I certainly think, as a child, most children love Christmas. Unfortunately, they don't have that baggage to bring with them. But as we get older and more mature, it brings new opportunities. And sometimes they're good, and sometimes they need to, they're hidden a bit.
Yeah. And it just, it's like Kathy said, it's supposed to be a happy time of year, but it sometimes the stress just gets to you. Mm-hmm. So have you seen anything in particular, Sonny, or any particular incidents that you can recall in your practice?
You on alphabetical?
Not just you're not personally. Now we don't need to get into that. But
I told Patty I wouldn't use her real name. Just for us, there's been just such a. We almost expect it to be different every year now. Because we have a child and grandchildren that are live internationally, and so they're not part of the mix. Or it's via social media type stuff, we do that, but I think we've gotten to the point now we try to accept that this year is going to be different,
right,
and that's easier for me than it is for the people that I see in the office. Yeah,
I would imagine,
because this time of year we have there's a lot of people that are looking for hope somewhere. Mm-hmm. And so they may talk to us, Stephen's a minister, Dave, or something, right? And then they get referred out to us. And Dave, I love what you said earlier about we're not the healer, right?
Yeah.
My role is hopefully to facilitate the healer doing what he needs to do for these people.
Yeah.
And it's getting them in a safe place where I don't I don't have an expectation of what they say. A lot of times people will come in and think they're going to say what I want to hear, but I don't want you to say what you think I want to hear. I want to know what's going on with you. What's different this year? What brings you into counseling this year that was not part of your life, not part of your family last year or previous years? Because I may be the first person that they've talked to.
Yeah, they haven't opened up on that. Yeah.
They have not opened up to it. So hopefully we can, much like Stephen's minister, we can provide that safe place for people to share what's going on.
Sure.
Well, and it's really hard because everybody has the mask on. You know, they put the mask on, they go to somebody's house and we're supposed to act like this, and they put that mask on, and we have so many masks. And the reality is we need to learn to live without the mask and accept one another. And that's really difficult, especially for family members, because you expect the correct thing. You know, parents expect good conversation or, you know, correct language. That just doesn't happen in most tables, you know?
Yep. Oh, there's always an outlier. You know?
Yeah.
I'm usually it. So
yeah, exactly.
So, Kathy, I wanted to ask you specifically this because addiction is really what winning the fight was centered around. And do you see that an increase or a rise in challenges this time of year? I mean,
absolutely. Again, I kind of go back to it's so hard because you've got mental health involved there, and then most people do not use substances. Well, most people use substances for one of three reasons or three of three reasons. We see an increase in substance use with mental health, and usually it's anxiety, depression, ADHD, etc. The second thing we see is a lot of trauma, and people don't realize there is so much trauma out there, and it could be anything from a grandparent dying to a dog dying to sexual abuse. I mean, it's just, there's so much. Right.
And then one person's trauma is not another.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the third thing we see a lot of is genetics. Like, for example, my brother was an alcoholic. He has 4 children, and all of them are substance users, whether it's alcohol or drugs and stuff like that. So they all suffer. And if we kind of wrap those things up and kind of started addressing those, we probably wouldn't see as much. But I think the substance use typically is because people are trying to feel better. Yeah. And, when you're high, you feel better. Yeah. And then when you're not high, it's a flip over, and that's when we really see problems.
And you start to see that ping pong effect.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And then you see all the frustration in families. Yeah. So then you get the anger and the fear and the judging, and it's just it's hard.
It's hard.
And I'm sure you also get uncertainty because you don't know who's going to show up this time.
And are they going to be sober?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, David, I'm going to ask you this specifically because, again, and you kind of outlined the role of the Stephen ministers. You're not licensed professional counselors. You're not pastors. You're just a listening ear, really, and try to help that way. But so, what do you tell people that they're struggling to find their footing? It's the holiday season, and everyone else seems to be so happy, and everyone on the Hallmark Channel is happy. At least by the end of the show, right. So what role do you see faith playing in their comfort and maybe what you relate to them?
Sure, and so the first thing I would say is, where have you seen God?
Yeah,
because I know. The more you look for God, the more you'll find him. And so in a time when people can feel isolated or, trying to hide certain feelings, if they can just step back perhaps and look for God, that's certainly a good place to start. Another place would be to list out what they're thankful for or what gifts are in their life. And then I think lastly is really go serve someone else.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have
no better way to forget your own, or at least temporarily forget your own problems.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many opportunities, and that's how God can bless you, right? Is to give you those opportunities to serve others.
Yeah. Oh, that's tremendous advice. I'll be listening to this podcast and taking notes afterward. So Sonny, I mean, you have formal training, and all of you really, just from experience, even have training on how to recognize when people need help. For those of us that aren't trained and don't know those signals, what should we be looking for in trying to pick up on a signal that someone may be in trouble?
Yeah, I think what I didn't realize getting into counseling it's listening really well to what's being said, but listening even better to what's not being said. Because a lot of times people will come in and they'll fill out their intake forms with certain things, and then after I visit with them for 30 minutes, that's not why they're there at all.
Yeah.
They're there for grief. They're there for a variety of reasons. And so it's just really relying on the Holy Spirit to give me ears to hear what I need to be hearing. And I think for me that's extremely important, because I can read somebody's form as they come in and they say depression and anxiety, and those are, man, you don't go to counseling unless you've got
depression and anxiety, right?
Yeah, one or both of them, right?
Yeah.
Throw some bipolar in there, yeah.
Oh,
You got it.
Got to throw some bipolar in
You're
there.
getting back to Kathy's trifecta.
And so many times people self-diagnose.
Oh,
Right, they'll read something on Facebook and say, I must have that, but it's getting to a point where you listen really well. I mean, there are certain things that we listen for. Are there suicidal ideations, or there self-harm? Is there anything like that going on? Do they have anger issues? What are the triggers? What are the things that and I've got some things that I use to see if I can almost trigger them, right?
Yeah. Just as a little test to see if what they're telling you is what the real problem.
What's the real problem?
Yeah.
And sometimes people put so much pressure on themselves to be somebody that they're not.
Right.
Especially at the holidays. They haven't seen family in a year sometimes. So when they come in the house, putting on that mask, Kathy, like you were saying, how well can I wear that? And that can become very tiring. That causes people to get very depressed and emotional because they're trying so hard to be something that they're just not able to be right now.
Sure.
right.
Sure.
Right?
Even if that might be their normal
Yeah.
way. It's just that something's out of whack.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and there's so much pressure put on families. Let's say even just Thanksgiving dinner. So if all these people come to your home for Thanksgiving dinner, all of a sudden the house has to be cleaned and the toilets have to be cleaned. And it's a lot of pressure for the entire family. And even if the kids aren't old enough to do stuff, the pressure that their parents are putting out is enormous. So there's so much anxiety just going on just to prepare for the holiday.
Yeah.
Looks like
Craziness.
Looks like you were looking in my window at Thanksgiving.
And that's even before politics
Yeah.
start.
Yeah.
That's right. So Kathy, once we realize somebody we love needs help, what's the first thing we should do? And I think maybe even more importantly, what should we not do?
Oh, now you're talking the drugs here. So I kind of take off in that direction.
Yeah.
The first thing we do is try to find them the help that they need. If they need therapy, I think everybody should have a therapist, honestly. And I wish there were more therapists around, especially in Flower Mound.
Yeah.
I just think that everybody should have a therapist.
Somebody professionally trained to listen.
Well, to listen.
Yeah.
And you can't expect, parents expect their kids to tell them stuff. Once they get in middle school, the parents have no say-so in their lives anymore.
Yeah.
You're old and you don't understand and stuff. So I feel like everybody needs a mentor or somebody to talk to. And also our kids, we have to remember, our kids tell us what they want us to hear, what we want to hear.
Yeah.
And so they're real good chameleons. They really keep all that stuff under, so it's hard for us to see. So that's why a therapist is perfect. But on the opposite side of that, we also, and we kind of touched on this, the only person that can help that person is themselves.
Yeah.
I can't fix my child. No matter how many times parents try to fix their families, and that's a parent's job. I got to make it better. They can't really do that. They can only give them support where they're at and try to help them with whatever they need, but they can't fix them. We can't fix each other.
Yeah.
And people have to understand that. We have to, we have to set boundaries. And most families don't have boundaries.
So even just teaching that lesson from a young age that, I can't fix you every time. I can't fix even the problem.
Right.
But I'm here and I can listen. I can support you, I guess. And
I can guide you.
Yeah. And I might be able to direct you to somebody that can do more than I can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Definitely the case. So for, let's say, for I don't know, David, I'll give you all the tough ones, so here you go. So for people that that, let's say, don't find Christmas particularly merry, do you think they can find a way back to joy? I mean, is it just, I'm sorry, Christmas is not your holiday, and you're going to have to live with that? I mean, or is there something beyond that we can do?
So, I think people can find joy in many different circumstances. I mean, just because people don't enjoy Christmas doesn't make them, I guess, abnormal.
Right.
But they should find some sort of semblance of there's caring. And I think you have to go back to the origin, really, of the Christ story, which is a gift given with no conditions.
Right.
And it's hard for people not to accept that. They may not be joyful about it. Many times they may want to reciprocate. Reciprocity is certainly a strong behavior in most people, and being able to accept a gift is an art form in many cases, and not one that, frankly, I find many people are very good at saying thank you.
Very true. I mean it's not only gift, but even something as minor as a compliment. Yeah. A lot of people are not good at accepting compliments.
I'm one of them.
Yeah, I'm not either, because mine is always, well, thank you, but didn't you notice that I'm really fat, or something like that.
Right.
You gotta just you always put the condition on, I think, when that kind of thing. But it's Sonny, have you seen anything specific where you can kind of lead somebody past really a holiday induced problem?
And in confidentiality, I'll call this guy Bob.
Okay.
Because I tell all my clients, if I mention your names outside of here or your case, your name is Bob.
Yeah.
And so I can never have a client named Bob.
So now they all think they're Bob.
They all
think this story's about them. So that's great. I love
that.
But
I had this guy come in, and he's the guy that you're talking about. Yeah. He's atheist, not a believer, but is surrounded by a family of believers that every Christmas he feels like they're just shoving it, onto him that you must believe, And, so I think part of his is I'm just going to refuse because my family says I have to. But one of the things I wrote, Galatians 5:22 and 23, the fruits of the Spirit. I just wrote down all of them except the last one. I said, would you like some joy in your life? Would you like some peace? Would you like some kindness? Right? Yeah. Just going down the list, and he's like, "Yeah, I want all those things."
I'm checking those boxes.
Yeah, I want some of that. I want some. But the last one that I shared with him was self-control.
Yeah.
Because without self-control, you put everything else at risk. So I said, if you want joy, just have self-control, especially during the holidays. Right? When your family wants you to consider the reason of the season, why are we celebrating this? Receive it, right?
Yeah.
They're not your enemies, and that's what I tell people. Your family cares for you. They're not enemies. So why do you hear them that way? Hear them as people who love you, care for you, and maybe understand something a little bit differently this time than you have in the past. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I also think that joy, you brought up joy, and it's a perfect example, but it's kind of like grief. Mm-hmm. It kind of goes in waves where you'll have joy, and it may not be at Christmas, but it may be at some other point. And then we kind of have to sit back and go, why are people not joyous at Christmas? But look at what's happened. It's turned into Santa Clauses. And I mean, people had their Christmas trees up before the turkey got out. Mine was still frozen and people had their trees up. And I'm like, okay. So we kind of expect more, but it's a wave. Our emotions are waves, very much like grief. Yeah. And we have to accept that as well. We have to kind of jump into that emotion and ride that wave and get what we can out of it, and then be able to, find the other side of that.
So I swear you've been reading my notes, because I had this question for you and you just jumped into it. So I think for a lot of people that struggle this time of year, there's a feeling that, well, once this season's over, then this struggle will be over.
Well, yeah, I'll lose that 20 pounds next year.
Exactly.
No, I didn't.
Yeah. I've had this, problem with whiskey, but once the holidays are over, and people aren't giving me bottles of whiskey, I'm going to be great.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the case.
No,
it doesn't
not
just
at all.
magically change.
No, it doesn't. And we have to, and it's kind of good because we have resolutions. New Year's comes and you kind of do your reflection. And that's when you start making some adjustments. And, we all have addictions. Mine is tortilla chips. As a matter of fact, I was not going to eat any today. And, they were going down my throat. I just
and the problem is when you go to a restaurant, they just keep coming.
Oh, I know.
They won't stop.
Yeah, I don't even care about
We always
the
use that
salsa
analogy.
anymore.
That's like God's love. It just keeps coming, and they keep refilling the bowl.
Yeah. But we all have something. And so we kind of have to, whatever that is, and we analyze that at the beginning of the year, and we try to adjust whether we can or not. That's where substance use really happens. Mm-hmm. They try really hard. I don't know an addict that really wants to be an addict, and every day they wake up and go, I'm not going to do this today. And 10 minutes later, they're doing it.
Sure.
So, it's the reflection. And I think that a lot of us get healthier at the beginning of the year, and then those habits kind of die off. I did pick up a habit for 2 years now of working out in the morning. And, that was great. And then I got real busy the last couple of months, and I'm like, I haven't worked out.
It's the time change. The time change.
Yeah, there you go. Time change. More chips and whatever.
David?
So through my work, we actually started a book club on a book called Atomic Habits. Have you guys?
Great book. Yeah, fantastic.
It's a great book. Yeah. And it was a good way to talk with peers and colleagues that, you may start very well intentioned, and it's not that your intentions are flawed. It's that you have to have a system to support you. And it's generally not the willpower of the person that fails. It's the fact that they didn't build a system around them. Yeah. And so typically once you build new habits, and it takes a while to do that, but you probably have a system somewhere in there that's supporting you. And if you don't maintain your habits, you probably didn't think enough through building that system to support you. Short-term rewards, peer group. I mean, there's a number of different ways, but did you? Yeah,
that book, there's a business group that I belong to. It's a very small, kind of an intimate group. There's a big group of 200 or 300 people, but within that we have a forum group, which is 8 to 10 guys, or men and women, that are in a smaller group. We meet once a month, and we spend basically half a day just kind of how are things going, within your business. It's not specific to personal, but it's open to personal. So a lot of times, we won't even talk about business anymore. If somebody's got an issue, we'll just focus on that issue. And that book is an excellent guidepost to that. I mean, and it's I guess, like you said, it's not just a system for the positive things you want to do. It's a system to build that accountability and to build a small group. In the Christian world, there's a thing called Walk to Emmaus that many Christians go on, and it's the result of that is you actually go out and become a better leader within your church and community. But to help you do that, you build a small accountability group, a reunion group, and you meet on a regular basis. And I think that is key. I think that's just key to mental health, and just to have a small group of people that you can really depend on it, and that are in it for you. They might be very critical of you, but not because they really, they're commenting on your hairline. They're really going it for you. They're just trying to make you go. Right. So Sonny's looking at me, and my hair is the same as his, except mine's under a hat. So I'll do that. Well, super. Yeah. Thank you all so much. This has been a fantastic discussion. And is there anything you guys want to say in closing? Just, for people that are listening and it's around the holidays and they're just saying, I'm not in the mood. I'm just not getting it this year.
But David, I think the first thing that comes to mind, and once again, thank you for inviting me to be a part of this. Yeah. Comes to mind is the idea of giving other people power that don't deserve to have power.
Amen.
Right. I know, people come in and they'll say, man, Uncle Bob's coming in, and he's just going to, it's like, if you know he's coming in and he's going to be on the same behavior he's been every year, why are you giving him that power to make you angry? Why are you allowing that? Because you get to choose the emotion that you're going to accept.
Yeah.
And so many times people will I'm just going to be angry. Well, Uncle Bob doesn't care if you're angry.
Yeah. In fact, he may like it if you're
He'll probably just have a beer.
And some chips.
There you go.
But I think it's just being careful as to who we are allowing, who are we giving power to
Sure.
that almost dictate our emotion?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and we also have to remember it's okay to not do exactly the same thing all the time. Like, for example, we had one year that I put a Christmas tree up and it didn't happen, and I took it down, I tried it again, took it down, and I put it back up in the attic. And to be honest with you, I don't know that we're putting a tree up this year. I'm kind of like, it was supposed to come out Friday and it didn't. And so then Sunday rolled around and I'm kind of like, for 3 weeks, that's a lot of work. I don't know that it's happening. And it's okay for us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
To let those things go.
Yeah.
For
yeah.
sure.
Well, Dave, thanks for allowing us. And I think the thing for me, at least, is just give yourself grace. Do a little bit of reflection. Give yourself grace.
Yeah.
Life is too short.
Super. Well, and thank you guys so much again for coming. And again, I'm pretty sure this podcast is going to have the most impact of anyone we've done this year, just because I can't think of anybody that hasn't faced all these things, sometimes year after year after year. So I do want to take a second to have each of you let our listeners know how to get a hold of your organization. So, David, I'll start with you with Stephen Ministers.
Sure. So you can go through one of the Doug or one of the ministers here, or through Barbara. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head,
Okay.
but Barbara is sort of the one that'll triage.
Barbara Caruth, probably.
Caruth,
Yeah.
Yes, I apologize. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
that's at Trietsch.
that's at Trietsch.
TMUMC.org.
Correct.
I guess. And
And so Barbara can help sort of triage to help facilitate so that the right person gets aligned to the right Stevens minister, because I may have certain skill sets and one of the other leaders may have different skill sets. So
some have bigger ears than others. Is that the whole thing? So, well, super. Kathy, how do we engage with winning the fight?
Well, it's so fun because my phone number is everywhere, and we're just going to give it out some more. It's so fun because I give it to everybody. Yeah. So our phone number is 972-467-7704. You can also see us online at WTF-winningthefight.org.
Super. And Sonny?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm actually on staff at Grapevine Counseling Center. It's a faith-based counseling center, but we'll see anybody. So they can go to grapevinecounselingcenter.com and look us up, read
Excellent.
our bios there.
So really anybody in the Metroplex then, really, if you guys are centrally located.
Yeah, we have clients coming from all over the Metroplex, yeah.
So there you have it, our last episode of Men in Progress for 2022. We hope you were blessed in some way by our discussion, and you'll join us again in the new year for our next discussion. Thanks again to Kathy O'Keefe, David Ware, and Sonny Gann for their time and expertise, and to our church production team for their help putting together this podcast. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Men in Progress, the podcast of, by, and for Christian men trying to be better fathers, better husbands, better leaders, and better men. I'm Dave Casey. We'll see you next time.
This episode of the Men in Progress podcast is sponsored by Trietsch Memorial United Methodist Church, where our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. If you're in or near Flower Mound, Texas on any Sunday morning, we would love to welcome you to any of the Trietsch services. Or you can follow our services anytime on our Facebook page or at tmumc.org.